They ignored my big day, but showed up when I bought a Tesla. I grew up in Madison, Wisconsin, in a two-story brick house with a neat lawn and a basketball hoop bolted above the garage. From the outside, it looked like a picture-perfect suburban family home. But inside, there was always an invisible scoreboard, and I was losing from the start. My father, Philip, worked as an insurance agent. He had a booming voice that could command a room, though at home, it was usually reserved for football games or bragging about my brother Brent. My mother, Joan, was a legal secretary, endlessly busy juggling bills and schedules, but somehow she always found time to polish Brent's trophies. As for me, I was just there. The younger child, the quiet one, the afterthought. I remember being 8 years old when Brent's middle school football team won a local championship. My parents threw a massive barbecue in the backyard, 50 guest streamers, even a cake with Brent's name and frosting. Neighbors clapped him on the back. Dad beamed, like Brent had single-handedly won the Super Bowl. And Mom fluttered around taking pictures. I stood at the picnic table wearing a new dress I'd begged Mom to buy, waiting for anyone to notice me. They didn't. The following year, I landed the lead role in my school's spring play. I practiced my lines for weeks, imagining Mom and Dad sitting in the audience smiling proudly. On opening night, I peeked through the curtain, scanning the crowd for their faces. Their seats were empty. Later, I learned they had stayed home to help Brent study for a math test. I performed anyway, blinded by the stage lights, but I carried a hollow pit in my chest the entire time. It became a pattern I couldn't ignore. Brent's milestones were celebrated with party speeches, entire weekends dedicated to him. Mine were dismissed with a distracted smile or a muttered, "That's nice, honey." When I won a statewide essay contest at 14, I brought the plaque home glowing with pride. Mom looked at it for a moment, said, "That's lovely," and set it aside before rushing off to help Brent prepare for his law scholarship banquet. The plaque ended up gathering dust on my dresser. Meanwhile, Brent's trophies gleamed from the living room mantel, polished until they shone. It wasn't just the big things. It was birthdays, forgotten conversations, cut short smiles that never reached their eyes when they turned toward me. Christmases where Brent unwrapped gleaming new gifts, while I opened sweaters 2 sizes too big, always with the phrase, "You'll grow into it." By the time I turned 16, I'd stopped expecting them to remember. That year, my birthday passed completely unacknowledged. I sat at the kitchen table, waiting all morning only to watch them rush Brent to a law school interview, then laugh over pizza that night without realizing what day it was. Brent wasn't cruel. He tossed me the occasional good job when I brought home straight A's, but it felt half-hearted like charity. He was too busy basking in the spotlight to notice the shadows he left behind. And my parents? They excused it all with the same lines. "We're busy. Don or Brent has a lot on his plate right now." What they meant was, "You don't matter as much." I learned to swallow the ache to keep it quiet. I started journaling late at night, scribbling down every missed moment, every absence. The essay contest, the play, the birthday. Each entry was a small protest proof that I existed even if they refused to see me. Ask yourself, what would you do if the people who were supposed to be your biggest cheerleaders never even showed up to the game? Would you scream? Would you beg? Or would you go silent like I did, hoping the silence itself might one day be loud enough to break through? By the end of my teens, I stopped reaching for their attention. Somewhere deep inside, I realized that no matter what I did, no matter how hard I shined, it would never be enough for them. And that realization hurt more than any insult ever could. By the time I hit my teenage years, the pattern was set in stone. Brent got the spotlight and I got the shadows. If his name was on something, my parents were front and center. If mine was, they were too busy. Take Brent's high school graduation, for example. My parents rented a banquet hall decorated with balloons and invited half the neighborhood. Dad gave a speech so full of pride he nearly cried, going on about Brent's law school scholarship as if he were already saving the world. I was 14 at the time. That very morning, I'd won a statewide essay competition, one of those contests where hundreds of students enter and only a handful come out on top. I carried the plaque home polished and heavy in my hands, thinking maybe this time they'd see me. Mom glanced at it for half a second and said, "That's nice, sweetheart," before rushing back to party preparations. By the end of the day, my plaque was shoved onto my dresser, while Brent's graduation photos were framed in every room of the house. It was always like that. My accomplishments weren't invisible, they were dismissed as though they were less real. Even neighbors picked up on it. One afternoon, Mrs. Keller from next door asked my mom how I was doing. Mom laughed softly and said, "Oh, Dawn's fine. She's quiet, keeps to herself." That single sentence cut deeper than any insult. I didn't want to be fine. I wanted to matter. The worst blow came when I turned 16. Birthdays are supposed to feel like milestones, at least a cake, a hug, a happy birthday whispered over breakfast. But on my 16th, nothing. No balloons, no gifts, not even a card. Mom spent the morning driving Brent to a college interview. Dad buried himself in work calls. Brent came home that evening full of stories about his interview, and the three of them laughed over takeout pizza. I sat in my room waiting for someone to remember. No one did. It wasn't just being forgotten, it was being erased. I started noticing how small the gestures were that I lived on. A nod from Brent, a distracted smile from Dad, a sweater 2 sizes too big with the excuse, "You'll grow into it." Those scraps of recognition were supposed to keep me fed, but I was starving. I asked Dad once timidly why they never came to my debate tournaments. He sighed, irritated. "We're busy, Dawn. Brent's got applications to finish." You understand? I didn't understand. I was 14, desperate for him to notice me. But I nodded and went back to my room, clutching my debate notes like they were secrets. Some nights, I'd sit on my bed and make lists in my journal, all the times they skipped my events, all the times Brent got celebrated. It was a way of proving to myself that I wasn't crazy, that this imbalance was real. Page after page, I documented every absence, every slight. It became a habit, my own private record of the favoritism that shaped me. Ask yourself, how many times could you be ignored before you stopped asking to be seen? Would you keep trying louder each time, or would you go quiet like I did, convincing yourself you didn't need them? By the end of high school, I'd stopped waiting for their applause. I realized applause was a currency my family reserved for Brent alone. And me, I had to find another way to survive without it. That realization didn't just sting, it hardened something in me. Every missed birthday, every forgotten award, every empty seat in the audience carved a scar. And scars don't disappear. They shape the way you carry yourself. I stopped asking, stopped hoping, and started building a world where maybe, just maybe, I could be seen. By the time I was 16, I'd stopped asking for recognition at home. My parents weren't going to notice, and Brent was too busy being their golden child. But life has a strange way of handing you sparks when you're standing in the dark. For me, that spark came in the form of a high school elective multimedia art. I signed up on a whim. I thought it would be an easy break from math and science, maybe a chance to doodle. Instead, I met Miss Ellis, a woman with sharp eyes and a contagious energy. On the first day, she stood at the front of the room, holding a clunky camcorder and said, "Art isn't just paint and canvas, it's storytelling. And today, you're the storytellers." Something inside me lit up. We started with small projects, 30-second clips meant to capture a feeling. Some kids filmed their pets, others filmed football games. I filmed raindrops on my bedroom window, the hum of traffic outside, the way light bent through a glass of water. When I edited the clips together using free software, I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. For the first time, I could shape how the world saw something. Miss Ellis noticed. She pulled me aside one afternoon, her eyes shining. "You've got an eye for moments most people miss. There's a contest coming up for local teens. You should enter." I wanted to say no. My parents had ignored every other milestone. Why set myself up for another disappointment? But Miss Ellis believed in me, so I took a chance. I poured weeks into a 1-minute film I titled Small Things. It was a montage of the ordinary kids, laughing at a bus stop, dew on grass, a frozen lake at dawn. To me, it wasn't just footage. It was proof that I could find beauty in the world even if my family refused to see mine. The night of the contest, I sat in the back of a community center, heart pounding. Parents filled the rows, cheering for their kids. My parents weren't there. Not even a text wishing me luck. I clenched the program in my hands, the paper damp with sweat. When Small Things played on the screen, the room went silent. For 60 seconds, strangers saw the world the way I did. Quiet, fragile, fleeting. When it ended, applause erupted. Real applause. For me. They announced the winners, and I nearly fell out of my chair when they called my name for first place. I stumbled to the stage, holding a tiny trophy, my face flushed. Strangers congratulated me, their smiles genuine. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. The high lasted until I got home. I set the trophy on the kitchen counter, hoping maybe it would spark something. Mom was folding laundry, Dad was glued to his phone. I told them I'd won. Mom said, "That's nice, honey," without looking up. Dad grunted. Brent walked in, mid-story, about a debate he'd won, and just like that, my moment disappeared. I carried the trophy to my room, closed the door, and stared at it under the dim light. My chest hurt, but underneath the hurt was a revelation I didn't need them to clap. I had an audience somewhere else. That night, I uploaded Small Things to YouTube under the name Dawn's Lens. I didn't expect much, maybe 10 views, maybe none. But within a week, it had 100. Comments trickled in. "This feels like home. Beautiful shots. Please make more." I read those comments over and over, my throat tight. Strangers on the internet saw me more clearly than my own family ever had. And once you've been seen, you can't go back to being invisible. That was the moment I knew I didn't have to keep begging my family for recognition. I could build a world where my voice mattered, where my perspective wasn't just tolerated but celebrated. I didn't know how big it would get or where it would lead, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I had found my spark. College was supposed to be a new beginning, a place where I could finally step out of Brent's shadow. I earned a partial scholarship to a communications program at the university in Madison. It didn't cover everything, so I took out student loans and worked part-time at a campus coffee shop. Mornings meant lattes for half-awake professors, evenings were lectures, and nights were reserved for editing videos on my battered laptop. My parents didn't help with tuition. They said they were tight on money because Brent's law school bills were priority. I told myself I didn't need them. Every dollar I earned, every hour I stayed up editing it felt like a brick in the foundation of the life I was building on my own. I kept uploading to Dawn's Lens. My videos were raw montages of campus life, dorm room chaos, autumn leaves swirling on the quad, the exhaustion of 2 a.m. study sessions. Slowly, my subscriber count ticked upward. 500, then 1,000. People left comments that kept me going. "This captures what college really feels like. You made me cry, but in a good way." Sophomore year, I met Professor Alan Burke. He was intense, pacing the lecture hall like a man with too many ideas to fit into one body. When he screened one of my short films, a 2-minute piece about all-night studying set to lo-fi beats, he stopped pacing. "This has soul," he said, staring straight at me. "You're not just filming. You're speaking. Those words stuck with me. For the first time, someone with authority didn't just notice my work, they respected it. Burke became my mentor. He pushed me harder than anyone ever had. When a national digital media competition opened, he insisted I apply. The project involved creating a campaign for a nonprofit, and I ended up leading a team of 4. We pitched a series of 1-minute videos on mental health awareness, blending interviews with students and subtle animations. I poured myself into the project, often staying awake until sunrise, obsessing over transitions and sound design. The exhaustion was brutal, but it felt worth it. When the results came in, my team had won first place, $10,000 and national recognition. I called my mom that night, my voice trembling with excitement. We won, I told her. $10,000 and our work is being featured on a national platform. Her response, that's nice. Dawn, did you hear Brent just closed a huge case? I hung up, staring at the trophy in my hand, the applause from strangers still ringing in my ears. My family's silence was deafening. It was the same script as always, Brent front and center, me invisible. But something shifted inside me that night. Their approval wasn't just absent, it was irrelevant. The applause from strangers, the encouragement from Burke, the messages from viewers who felt less alone because of my videos, those things mattered more. After graduation, I took a leap most people thought was reckless. I turned down a corporate job offer and threw myself into Dawn's lens and freelance video work. My first apartment was tiny, with peeling paint and a leaky faucet, but it was mine. I filmed ads for local cafes, promos for small shops, and tutorials for editing tricks on YouTube. The grind was relentless. Ramen for dinner. Rent always late by a day or two. But my channel hit 50,000 subscribers, and I felt momentum building. One video, a breakdown of how I crafted a viral clip, exploded to 100,000 views. Suddenly, brands were emailing me. Strangers called me inspiring. At night, lying on my thrift store mattress, I thought about all the dinners I'd eaten alone as a kid, waiting for my parents to notice me. I thought about Brent's trophies on the mantle, my essay plaque collecting dust on my dresser. And I whispered to myself, they may have ignored me, but they don't get to define me. That whisper turned into fuel. I wasn't just making videos anymore, I was building something bigger. And for the first time, I started to believe maybe I was destined for more than just surviving in my family's shadow. Maybe I was meant to outshine it completely. After college, the leap from dorm projects to the real world was terrifying. I had a communications degree, a channel with 50,000 subscribers, and a laptop that wheezed like it was on life support. What I didn't have was stability. Most of my classmates took safe jobs in marketing or PR firms. I remember sitting in a coffee shop with a job offer letter in one hand and my notebook of video ideas in the other. The corporate job promised health insurance and a predictable paycheck. My notebook promised nothing, just exhaustion, ramen dinners, and a dream that felt impossible. I chose the notebook. Those first months nearly broke me. I worked out of a co-working space that smelled like stale coffee and ambition. My rent ate half of every paycheck. My bank account was a graveyard of overdraft fees. I hustled filming ads for small cafes, promos for yoga studios, graduation reels for local families. Every gig paid just enough to cover gas and groceries. But my channel kept growing. Tutorials on editing tricks, behind-the-scenes vlogs of my projects, short documentaries that captured the vibe of Madison's hidden corners. Then one video, how to make a story go viral, caught fire. 200,000 views in a week. Comments flooded in. You've got the gift. You made me believe I can do this too. It was the first time I thought maybe I can scale this into something real. I rebranded my freelance hustle into Spark Vibe Studio. The name came from what I wanted every video to do, ignite something even for a second. I designed a cheap logo on Canva, printed business cards with glossy edges I couldn't afford, and told myself this was my empire's first brick. For a while, it was just me and my beat-up Canon camera. Then, at a local tech conference, everything changed. I was giving a shaky pitch to a group of investors, my slides glitching, my voice too fast. I saw most of them glaze over, but one woman leaned forward. Sylvia Grant, mid-40s, sharp suit, sharper eyes. She flipped through my portfolio without looking at me, then finally said, your work cuts through. Let's make it happen. I thought she was bluffing, but 2 weeks later, Sylvia invested $200,000 into Spark Vibe. Enough to hire a small team, upgrade equipment, and lease an office with floor-to-ceiling windows that made us feel like giants. That was the turning point. We started small videos for local startups, quirky campaigns for restaurants, edgy promos for indie fashion brands. Then word spread. Spark Vibe landed a contract with a national retailer. Suddenly, we were on planes filming in New York lofts and California beaches, our work plastered across Instagram feeds. Clients loved us because we didn't just sell products, we told stories. We made coffee beans feel like morning love letters. Sneakers felt like rebellion. An app felt like friendship in your pocket. My team grew from 3 to 12. Our downtown Madison office buzzed like a hive. Music blasting whiteboards full of half-baked ideas, ramen cups stacked next to MacBooks. Long nights blurred into early mornings, but the exhaustion felt holy, like proof I was building something worth bleeding for. When Spark Vibe hit its first million in revenue, I bought pizza for the entire building, not just my team. Strangers in the elevator congratulated me like I'd won the lottery. But inside I carried a quiet ache. Because while strangers were celebrating me, my family still hadn't said a word. Not about my competition win. Not about Spark Vibe, not even about the feature in a national magazine that had called me a digital storyteller redefining content. I mailed my parents a copy of that article highlighting the paragraph where my name appeared. Weeks passed. No call, no text, nothing. It was a strange kind of grief, building the life I always wanted, but realizing the people I once wanted it for weren't looking. Still, I kept climbing. We expanded to new cities, signed contracts that paid more in a month than I'd earned in my first year out of school. Investors whispered about buyouts. By the time the streaming giant came knocking with an acquisition offer $18 million, I was numb. I signed the deal in the glass conference room, cameras flashing, lawyers shaking hands. My bank account went from fumes to fortune in a single click. Everyone congratulated me. My team popped champagne. Sylvia hugged me like a proud parent. And me, I drove home that night in silence, the weight of everything pressing down. I should have called my mom, told her I did it. I should have heard pride in her voice. Instead, I sat alone in my apartment scrolling through old voicemails, all of them from clients or friends. None from my family. I'd built an empire. I had money recognition strangers who thought I was brilliant. But the one thing I'd never have was my parents' applause. I told myself it didn't matter. That the absence of their approval was what made me relentless. That my success was the revenge they'd never admit I deserved. But sometimes, late at night, staring out at the city lights, I wondered, was I still that invisible girl begging someone to look my way? After the buyout, my days no longer revolved around deadlines and panic. I had money, I had freedom, but what I didn't have was someone to share it with. Success feels strangely hollow when the only thing waiting for you at home is silence. That's when I met Kyle. It wasn't dramatic. No whirlwind rom-com meet cute. Just a quiet Tuesday afternoon at a coffee shop in downtown Madison. I was hunched over my laptop editing footage, headphones on face lit by a screen. He was in line ordering a plain black coffee, his sleeves rolled up, a mechanical pencil clipped to his shirt pocket. He noticed the software I was using, leaned over slightly, and said, "Final Cut Pro, huh? That's hardcore." I pulled off my headphones surprised. Most people saw my editing and called it YouTube stuff. He knew exactly what it was. That small moment turned into a conversation that stretched long after his coffee went cold. We talked about deadlines, about Madison winters, about how he designed bridges for a living. I told him stories of filming until dawn. He told me about long nights staring at blueprints. It wasn't flashy, it was steady. And after years of chasing people who didn't see me, that steadiness felt revolutionary. We started dating. He'd bring takeout to my office when I worked late, sitting quietly until I was ready to close my laptop. I dragged him to art fairs where he pretended to understand my rants about color grading. He wasn't swept away by my success. He didn't treat me like a trophy. He treated me like a person. A year later, he proposed. Nothing elaborate, just us. A quiet park bench, the lake shimmering behind us. He pulled out a ring, hand steady, and said, "Dawn, you are my home. Marry me." I said yes, before he even finished the sentence. Planning the wedding was a storm of excitement and dread. I wanted it to be small, intimate, string lights in a garden. A soft ivory gown that felt like stepping into a dream. Invitations went out, and yes, I sent them to my family. Despite everything, I still hoped. I still believed maybe, just maybe, they would show up when it mattered most. I called my mom directly, my voice tight. "It's my wedding. Will you be there?" She paused, her answer like ice. "We'll try dawn. Brent's got a big case coming up." I hung up with my stomach in knots, telling myself they'd come. That they'd surprise me at the last moment. The day arrived. The garden glowed with string lights, music humming softly. Kyle stood at the altar, his eyes locked on mine, like I was the only person in the world. For a moment, everything felt perfect. But when I glanced at the seats reserved for my family, empty. No mom, no dad, no Brent. I'd held out hope until the last possible second, even as the officiant began. Even as Kyle slipped the ring onto my finger. Even as people clapped and cheered. My family seats stayed cold and vacant. I smiled through it, leaned into Kyle's kiss, let the camera flashbulbs freeze the illusion of joy. But inside, I was shattering. The absence hurt more than I expected. It wasn't just that they skipped a milestone, it was that they skipped me. Again. Kyle's family filled the void without hesitation. His parents pulled me into hugs, calling me our Dawn. His sister took over the playlist, dragging everyone onto the dance floor. They made the night feel alive. They gave me everything mine should have. Later in their backyard, we ate pie at picnic tables under the stars. Kyle's dad raised a glass. To Dawn and Kyle, he said, his voice warm, "Here's to family." My throat tightened. Gratitude mixed with grief. Their warmth highlighted my parents' coldness. I smiled. I danced. I laughed with Kyle's cousins. But deep down, the bruise remained. The girl inside me, still staring out into an empty audience, waiting for parents who would never clap. After the wedding life with Kyle became a rhythm I didn't know I craved. Sunday coffee on the porch. Fights about dishes that always ended with laughter. Quiet nights where he read sketches and I edited videos. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't carrying everything alone. And yet every time I looked at our wedding photos, my gaze drifted toward those empty chairs. They were ghosts in the background of every image, reminders of a truth I didn't want to face. My family didn't just forget me, they chose not to see me. After the wedding, I tried to bury the ache. Kyle's family became my anchor. His mom called me just to ask how I was sleeping. His dad fixed a leaky faucet in our new house without me even asking. I found comfort in their everyday care, the kind I'd begged for all my life. But old wounds don't vanish. They linger raw under the surface. Every time I uploaded a new video, hit a new milestone, part of me still hoped my phone would light up with a message from my mom or dad. It never did. Until one afternoon, years later, when I posted a picture of my new Tesla. Electric blue, fully loaded, 120,000, my gift to myself. After years of scrapping, hustling, surviving. I parked it in the driveway, sunlight bouncing off the hood like a spotlight. For once, I didn't hide my success. I shared it on Facebook, a single caption: dreams do pay off. The photo got hundreds of likes from strangers and friends. From my family, silence. At least for a while. 3 days later, my phone buzzed. Caller ID, mom. I stared at it, my heart pounding. Years of silence. They'd skipped my wedding. They'd skipped birthdays, holidays, everything. Now they were calling because of a car. I answered, my voice flat. Hello? Her tone was clipped, rehearsed. Dawn, we need to talk. Family meeting. Tomorrow. Family meeting. Like I was 12 again, about to be scolded for not cleaning my room. My stomach churned, but I agreed. Not because I owed them, because I wanted to hear it. To finally face whatever game they were playing. The next day, I drove the Tesla to my parents' house. The same brick home I'd grown up in, the one that had never felt like mine. As I pulled up, I saw Brent's SUV in the driveway. My pulse quickened. Dad opened the door, his face unreadable. Good to see you, he said, as if I'd been there last week. Inside, Mom was setting out coffee, her movements precise, almost ceremonial. Brent sat on the couch, scrolling his phone, not even glancing up. No hugs, no warmth. Just tension so thick it felt like a second skin. We gathered around the dining table, the same one where I'd once begged for them to notice my essay contest, when the same one where Brent's trophies had been paraded while my plaques gathered dust. Mom started, her voice overly sweet. Dawn, we saw your car. You've done well for yourself. I nodded slowly. Yes, I have. Brent leaned forward, his eyes sharp. Ella and Mason are starting college soon. Tuition is brutal. I'm underwater with the mortgage. You've got the means now. It's time to step up. My hands tightened around the mug in front of me. Step up. Dad chimed in, tone firm. Family steps up for each other. That's how it works. I stared at them, the words hitting me like cold water. Years of neglect, of empty seats at every milestone, and this was what finally dragged them to my door money. My voice trembled, but not from fear. From rage I'd carried too long. You want to talk about family? Where were you when I got married? When I walked down the aisle and looked for you? Mom's eyes dropped to the table. We were busy, Dawn. Brent had a case. I laughed bitterly. Busy. You've been busy my whole life. My plays, my contests, my graduation, you missed all of it. But now you see a Tesla and suddenly I matter. Brent rolled his eyes. Don't make it dramatic. We're just asking for help. Help, I repeated. You mean a payout. Dad leaned in, he had voice hard. You've got millions. What's a little for your niece and nephew? I felt the years of silence, of rejection boiling over. I built my life without you. I won awards, built a company, sold it for $18 million, all while you cheered for Brent's every move and ignored mine. You didn't even send a card for my wedding. Mom's face tightened, her voice weak. We meant to. Meant to. Doesn't cut it, I snapped. You chose him. Every time. The room went quiet, their faces a mix of shock and guilt. Brent muttered, you're being selfish. Selfish. That word again. The word that had been used to shame me since childhood. For wanting space, for wanting recognition, for wanting anything that wasn't Brent's. I pushed back my chair, the scrape echoing like a gunshot. You think I owe you? I don't. Not 1 cent. They stared stunned. What they didn't know was that I'd already made my move. Weeks ago, after Mom's call, I prepared something they could never twist into obligation. I pulled a folder from my bag and slid it across the table. A press release already sent to local news. I donated $15 million to a children's education charity funding scholarships for kids who'd never had a chance. This, I said, my voice steady, is what family means to me. Helping people who need it, not people who ignored me until they saw dollar signs. Mom's hands shook as she read the document. 15 million, she whispered. Dad's face went red. You're throwing it away. Brent slammed his fist on the table. That could have set Ella and Mason up for life. I met his eyes without flinching. Then set them up yourself. You're their father. I'm not your bank. I stood, my heart pounding, but my chest strangely light. For once, the weight was theirs to carry, not mine. I walked out of that dining room like I was shedding a second skin. My mom's voice cracked behind me, calling my name, but I didn't turn. I'd heard enough apologies wrapped in excuses, enough demands dressed up as family values. This wasn't love, it was leverage, and I was done. The air outside felt different, sharp and cold, but freeing. I slid into my Tesla, gripped the steering wheel, and let myself breathe. My pulse was still racing, but for the first time in years, it wasn't from fear, it was from release. That night, I told Kyle everything. Every word, every look. How my family had sat there, not as parents or siblings, but as creditors demanding payment. He listened quietly, his hand over mine, his jaw tight with anger. You don't owe them a thing, he said finally. I know, I whispered. But part of me wanted them to finally see me. Not the money, me. Kyle pulled me close. They never will. And that's not on you. The next morning, my phone exploded. Texts, voicemails, emails. Mom's voice, pleading. Dad's voice, demanding. Brent's voice, dripping with disdain. Don't do this, Dawn. We're family. You'll regret turning your back on us. I blocked them all, one by one. Each number deleted felt like cutting a thread that had been strangling me since childhood. But the silence didn't last. The fallout came fast. A cousin posted vague complaints on Facebook about selfish relatives who forget blood. My aunt left a voicemail saying I was cruel to deny Brent's kids a future. Neighbors whispered that I'd let success go to my head. It was the same script I'd grown up with. I was always the problem, always the villain, always invisible, unless they needed someone to blame. Only this time, I refused to play the role. I turned my attention to what I had chosen, the charity the kids whose lives would actually change because of that donation. News outlets picked up the story. Headlines read, "Local entrepreneur donates 15 loaves to fund scholarships." Strangers messaged me saying thank you, saying I gave them hope. One teacher emailed me, "My students see themselves in you. You've given them a future." Those words filled the cracks my family had carved into me. They were strangers, yet they saw me more clearly than my parents ever had. Meanwhile, through the grapevine, I heard about the ripple effect on my family. Brent lost his house. The mortgage he'd mentioned at the meeting came crashing down when he couldn't keep up with payments. Ella and Mason had to move into a cramped apartment, their dreams of a private college shrinking to community classes. My parents delayed retirement, picking up side jobs to keep the lights on. Part of me felt a pang, especially for Ella and Mason. They hadn't asked to be pawns in their father's pride. But then, I remembered every holiday I'd spent sitting alone while Brent's kids were showered with attention. Every birthday call I'd never gotten. I wasn't their savior. I wasn't responsible for fixing what their parents had broken. Kyle's family became my sanctuary. His mom called me every Sunday sharing recipes and sending me silly memes. His dad checked in just to ask about my projects. His sister FaceTimed me from her messy kitchen baby, on her hip, reminding me that love could be loud, imperfect, and real. That was family. Not the people who demanded I hand over my home or my money, but the ones who showed up no strings attached. I began to see my own childhood differently. Every overlooked play, every missed birthday, every empty seat. It wasn't a reflection of my worth. It was proof of theirs, proof that they couldn't see past Brent's shadow long enough to notice me. I wasn't invisible anymore. Late at night, I'd sit on the porch with Kyle, coffee in hand, and watch the world go quiet. "Do you regret it?" he asked once. I thought about it, really thought. The money I gave away wasn't coming back. My family wasn't coming back either, not in the way I once wanted. But what I gained was peace. "No," I said finally. "I don't regret it." Because for once, I chose me. The word hung in the air like a promise. Choosing myself meant more than cutting ties. It meant setting boundaries that couldn't be crossed no matter how loud the guilt tripping got. It meant recognizing that family isn't defined by blood, it's defined by presence, by care, by showing up when it counts. And mine hadn't, so I built a new family with Kyle. With his parents, with kids at the charity who reminded me of my younger self, waiting for anyone to clap for them. That was my legacy. Not Brent's mortgage, not my parents' excuses, not their empty chairs, but the kids who would grow up knowing they mattered, the community I chose, the peace I earned. I'd walked away from my family, but in truth, I'd walked toward myself. When I cut ties with my family, I thought the silence would crush me. Instead, it became fertile ground. Without their voices in my ear, criticizing, guilt-tripping, demanding I could finally hear myself. The first thing I did was dive deeper into the charity I had funded. It wasn't just a press release anymore, it was my purpose. I showed up at workshops not as some millionaire benefactor in a suit, but as Dawn, the girl who knew what it felt like to be overlooked. That's where I met Mia. 14, quiet, always sketching storyboards in the back of the room. She reminded me of me doodling in notebooks, dreaming in silence. One afternoon, she shoved a USB stick into my hand and muttered, "Can you watch this?" I did. It was a rough video. Shaky camera, uneven cuts, but the heart was there. A story about her neighborhood, about resilience in small places. Watching it, I felt the same spark I'd once felt with Small Things, the video that started my path. I pulled her aside and said, "You've got something, Mia. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Her eyes lit up like no one had ever said that to her before. That moment alone made every ugly family fight worth it. I began mentoring other kids too. Some wanted to make films. Some wanted to code. Some just wanted someone to say, "I see you." I gave them what I had once begged for: attention, encouragement, belief. At home, Kyle and I started planting roots of our own. We bought a modest house with a porch big enough for morning coffee and a yard that begged for summer barbecues. His parents came over every Sunday, arms full of leftovers and laughter. His sister dropped by with her baby, leaving toys scattered on our living room floor. For once, the chaos felt good. It felt alive. I'd catch myself smiling during those dinners, surrounded by people who weren't tied to me by blood, but by choice. That was the difference. They chose me, and I chose them. Sometimes, I still thought about my parents. About Brent, about the niece and nephew who had been collateral in their entitlement. I wondered if they ever sat around that old dining table and thought about me. If they regretted the empty chairs at my wedding. If they realized what they had thrown away. But then, Kyle's dad would hand me a plate of roast, or Mia would show me a new video she'd edited, or Kyle himself would squeeze my hand under the table, and I'd know. I wasn't missing out. They were. Because family isn't the people who share your last name. It's the ones who clap when you win, who sit in the audience no matter how small the stage, who pick up the phone just to say, "I'm proud of you." And in building Spark Vibe and building a marriage with Kyle and building a community for kids like Mia, I had built exactly that. One evening, I stood on our porch looking out at the sunset, painting the sky in orange and gold. Kyle came up behind me, his arms wrapping around my waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. I leaned into him, the weight of the past finally light enough to carry. "That I'm not invisible anymore," I said softly. "I don't need their applause. I've got my own." Kyle kissed my temple. "You've always had it. You just finally believe it." I smiled, watching the last light dip below the horizon. For the first time in my life, the future didn't feel like something I had to earn or beg for. It felt wide open, waiting for me to write it. And this time, I wasn't writing it alone. People always ask me if I regret it. If I regret cutting my family off, refusing to pay for Brent's mortgage, walking away from parents who raised me even if they never saw me. The answer isn't simple. Some nights, I still dream about those empty chairs at my wedding. About the time I was 8 years old, scanning the crowd for my parents at my school play and finding only strangers' faces. About birthdays where the only candlelight came from my own bedside lamp. That longing never vanishes completely. The child in me will always ache for what she never got. But here's the truth. I've come to live by regret doesn't feed you. Regret doesn't keep a roof over your head or dignity in your chest. Regret keeps you begging at doors that will never open. Walking away from my family wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving I was richer or stronger or better. It was about peace, about refusing to carry the weight of their neglect any longer, about saying no more. And yes, it cost me. I lost the illusion that they might change. I lost the fantasy of one day hearing my mother say, "I'm proud of you." I lost the comfort of pretending that blood was enough to bind us. But in losing them, I gained myself. I gained mornings where I wake up without dread, evenings where I sit across from Kyle and laugh until my sides hurt weekends, where I mentor kids who actually look at me with shining eyes, grateful that someone believes in them. I gained a chosen family. I gained love without conditions. I gained the ability to look in the mirror and say, "You were always enough." They just couldn't see it. Sometimes I drive past my parents' house in Madison. The brick walls look smaller than I remember, the lawn less green. I imagine them sitting inside wondering why I won't call. Maybe they tell themselves I'm stubborn or selfish or cruel. Maybe they convince themselves I'll come back when I realize family is forever. But here's the thing. Family isn't forever. Not if it destroys you. Not if it refuses to see you. Not if it only shows up with its hand out. Family is choice. It's action. It's presence. And they failed the test long before I ever walked away. So no, I don't regret it. But I do wonder sometimes. Not about me. I know I made the right choice. I wonder about them. About whether they ever sit in that house and ask themselves the hard question. What does it say about us that our daughter would rather build a life without us than with us? Because that's the question I'll leave you with right now as you listen to my story. Ask yourself, what would you do if the people who were supposed to love you became the people who erased you? Do you stay and keep bleeding for their comfort, or do you finally stand up and say enough? There isn't a universal answer, but for me, choosing myself wasn't selfish. It was survival. And if you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever stared at an empty chair waiting for someone who never came, know this, you are not alone. You do not have to keep waiting. You can choose yourself too. Because in the end, peace isn't something your family can give you. Peace is something you take back when you finally realize you were never the problem. I'm Dawn, and this is how I stopped being invisible. Thanks for being here and following along. Stories like this remind us that strength comes when you finally stand your ground. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your own story in the comments. I read everyone.